July 1st, 2002, Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937, a Tupolev Tu-154M with 69 people on board, and DHL Flight 611, a Boeing 757 cargo flight with 2 people on board, are rapidly converging with each other in the skies above Uberlingen in southern Germany. TCAS alerts are advising the Tupolev to climb and the DHL flight to descend, but air traffic control is telling the Tupolev to descend. Air traffic control is telling the Tupolev that the DHL flight is to their right, when in reality it is to their left. The DHL flight tries to tell air traffic control they're descending, but their transmissions are being blocked by the air traffic control discussion with the Tupolev. The airplanes collide at approximately 35,000 feet, with the DHL vertical stabilizer slicing the Tupolev in half. Both planes fall to the ground and all on board perish. How is it possible for 2 planes to collide while utilizing TCAS and listening to air traffic control? Find out on this episode of Black Box Down. Hello everyone, welcome to Black Box Down. It's Gus and Chris. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing good.
This is a big episode we're doing today. It's one that has been requested quite a bit on social media. Follow us at Black Box Down Pod, and that I've been wanting to do for a while. But I don't know. I just felt like there is so much going on in this. I'm sure you could probably already tell from the intro. This is an absolutely insane event. Maybe one of the most high-profile events that we're going to cover. Even if people don't even if people don't know, have never heard of this or don't know of this incident is like maybe the most jaw-dropping out of any that we've done. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because this is pretty 2002. This seems pretty late for planes to be colliding. Right? Because we've covered collisions, but that was when was that? The first one was 30s?
Yeah, we did it a long time ago. That was the first one, and I mean, it still does happen. Remember, we talked about that Embraer jet and that Gol Airlines over Brazil, where they were flying at the wrong altitudes and they hit each other because of a transponder fail. There were a whole bunch of things, but you would think nowadays we've talked about TCAS and how it helps pilots avoid collisions. That this is the kind of thing that doesn't happen anymore. But 2002, I guess 20 years ago is a long time, but it still seems modern. There's enough technology in the planes to avoid this kind of thing.
I remember TCAS. Can you just quickly give a, quick little summary of it?
Sure. It's a system on the plane that can help pilots know when there's other planes in the area that are converging with them. It just gives them alerts. And then if it seems like they're getting even closer to the point where they're going to collide, the TCAS coordinates with each other in the different planes and does a conflict resolution where it'll tell one plane to dive and one plane to climb, or one plane to turn right and the other turn left, to have them avoid each other.
Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, because it actually they communicate with each other so that they both turn the opposite directions, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, there's two different, I guess, kind of alerts that TCAS would give you. First is like a traffic advisory when it tells you there's another plane, it's getting close and converging on you. And then the second one is more urgent. It's a resolution advisory. That's when it's like, okay, you need to do this now to avoid the collision.
Okay.
So that's kind of in a nutshell, high level, how all that works. Man, we're diving into it already. Before we go any further, I do want to remind people, give us a follow on social media, like I said, at Black Box Down Pod. Go look for Black Box Down on YouTube. We have animated videos there, and we just launched an explainer series, just short couple-minute videos that explain, an aspect of flight that you might be wondering about. For example, we just uploaded a 5-minute long video about, is airplane mode on your phone really necessary? What does that do? Just some new content we're trying out to see how it goes. If you want, you can also check out blackboxdownpod.com, where you can learn all about getting a premium subscription to Black Box Down. You continue listening to Black Box Down, whatever podcast platform you're already listening to it on. And if you want, you can pay $2.99 a month and get access to the episodes early and get access to the episodes in an ad-free format. If you want, check that out. And of course, we've got some merch. We have some brand new shirt, brand new sticker, brand new mug that all hit store.roosterteeth.com, which you can conveniently find in our link tree. Thanks to Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And that link tree is on all our social media, I believe.
And if anyone has purchased any merch recently or subscribed to the new premium or anything, thank you, because that really helps us make the show.
Thank you. We really, really appreciate it. I was just wearing our new shirt yesterday. You saw me. We were in the office together.
I wore it too, but then I got it dirty before I could make it to the office.
Chris, I got mine dirty too. I have a stain on it. I think I spilled coffee on it. I need to buy another one.
how it was raining like crazy the other day? Yeah. I wore it, and somehow the wet rain got my seatbelt wet, and then the dirt from my seatbelt bled onto my shirt. It was stupid.
Oh.
I was like, well, one, I need to clean. I don't know you could get a dirty seatbelt, but I guess I did.
Your car is filthy, Chris.
Yeah, I do. I really need to clean my car. It's embarrassing.
Okay. Anyway, now all the housekeeping's out of the way.
Because I'm more concerned about planes than cars, Gus.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Got to keep your seatbelt clean in a plane, too. So people generally refer to this as the Überlingen mid-air collision because it occurred over a town called Überlingen in southern Germany. And this was back on July 1st, 2002. And like I said, there were two flights. The first one was Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937. This flight was crewed by Captain Alexander Mikhailovich Gross, who was 52 years old with over 12,000 flight hours. First officer Oleg Pavlovich Grigoriev, who was 40 years old with 8,500 flight hours. And the first officer was actually there to evaluate the captain's performance.
Oh.
He was another captain who was evaluating the person flying as captain. We've talked about these before. It's like evaluation flights. You make sure, everything's going fine. So even though he was the first officer, he was a captain.
Okay.
And the pilot, who was normally the first officer, Murat Itkolov, who was 41 years old with 7,900 hours, was still there. He wasn't serving on the flight, but he was still sitting in the cockpit.
So how many people are in the cockpit?
So it was those three pilots, two of them who were captains and one of whom was a first officer. But there were also two more people in the cockpit.
Okay, so, wow, crowded.
Yeah, there was also a flight navigator, Sergei Karlov, who was 50 with 13,000 flight hours, and flight engineer Oleg Valiv, who was 37 years old with 4,200 flight hours. So there are 5 people total: the captain, the first officer, who was actually a captain, and then the regular first officer who got bumped and who's just sitting in there, as well as the flight navigator and flight engineer.
All right.
So just setting the stage, there are a lot of people up there. The aircraft used was a Tupolev Tu-154M with 10,788 flight hours. Tupolev, they're Russian mid-planes. So you've probably never flown on one, I'll tell you, Chris.
Okay.
Slightly older plane as well, which is why, there's also a flight engineer and a flight navigator, things that have been replaced in more modern airlines. The Tupolev was introduced back in 1972. It was produced up until 2013. So an older plane. It's a tri-jet. It's got 3 engines all at the back of the plane.
And it's the bigger... Wait, is that the bigger of the two that hit?
No, the other plane is bigger. And we'll get to that one in just a second. So there were 60 passengers on this plane and 4 flight attendants on board. Most of the passengers were children who were on a school trip flying from Russia to the northeast coast of Spain. I believe it was like a UNESCO organized trip where it was like students who were excelling in various fields, like either arts or academics or athletics. They were, being rewarded with this trip. The second flight was a DHL Cargo Flight, and it was Flight 611. This flight was crewed by Captain Paul Phillips, who was 47 years old with 12,000 flight hours, and First Officer Brant Campioni, who was 34 with 6,600 flight hours. And this plane was a 12-year-old Boeing 757 with 39,022 hours on it. And like I said, it was a cargo flight, so the 2 pilots were the only passengers on board that plane. The DHL flight was on a route from Bahrain to Bergamo, Italy, onto Brussels, Belgium, and then back to Bahrain. And then these 2 pilots had flown this route several times together during the previous month. And at 1:30 p.m. UTC, they departed Bahrain and landed at Bergamo almost 6 hours later at 7:10 p.m. Just for reference, all these times are going to be in UTC just to avoid confusion. When they were in Bergamo, they refueled, had a cargo change. It's a cargo flight, right? Stuff comes off, stuff goes back on. And they took off at 9:06 p.m. for Brussels. And they climbed to 26,000 feet initially. At 9:21 p.m., the crew contacted Zurich Area Control, and they were cleared to climb to 32,000 feet. But they requested 36,000 feet, which was the altitude selected on their flight plan. At 9:29, the crew reached 36,000 feet. And of course, they're going to want to fly higher because it's, the air is thinner, smoother flight, more fuel efficient. Just better all around. That's why planes fly so high.
Oh, actually, I didn't know that till I don't think that's why it's more efficient up there. I guess it makes sense. It's like less dense.
Yeah, there's less resistance, you could say. And I don't know about this specific flight, but the winds at that altitude might have been more favorable to them. They may want the winds to help push them along to get where they're going a little more quickly. A headwind will slow them down and a tailwind will speed them up. Ground speed. So at 9:29, they reached their requested altitude of 36,000 feet. And at 9:34 p.m., the first officer handed control of the plane to the captain so he could use the restroom. This is a cargo flight, so it's not quite like a normal passenger plane. On this plane, the lavatory was actually installed in the rear of the cockpit. So don't even have to leave the cockpit. It's
it's all there.
It's
and
all
everything
right there.
everything else is just like storage or whatever in the back.
Right. Right. Presumably it's all just space for cargo. At about 12 seconds after the controls were handed to the captain, the TCAS alarmed the crew about possibly conflicting traffic. So like I said earlier, this is a traffic advisory.
Mm-hmm.
About 14 seconds after the first alarm went off, it started saying, descend, descend. The autopilot was then switched off and the control column was pushed forward a little bit. And according to a flight data recorder, they reached a descent rate of 1,500 feet per minute over a period of 12 seconds.
Okay.
At 9:35, the first officer made the remark, traffic right there. And the captain responded with yes. Then the TCAS started saying, increased descent, increased descent.
Did he, when he said traffic right there, is it because he saw?
Yeah, he's probably pointing out the window and saying that's where it is. You know, it's dark, so he can probably see the lights and it's saying, you know, there's the traffic. You know, that way they know and they can keep an eye on it. The first officer then returned to his seat and said, increase. Over the next 10 seconds, the descent rate increased to 2,600 feet per minute. The captain then reported the TCAS descent to Zurich Area Control. The first officer then told the captain to descend and then to descend hard. The control column was then pushed fully forward. Meanwhile, while all this is going on the other plane, which is the Bashkirian Airlines Flight, that flight departed from Moscow to go to Barcelona, like I said, at 6:48 p.m. At 9:12 p.m., while cruising at 36,000 feet near the border of Austria and Germany, the crew were instructed to switch to Zurich Area Control, which was the same frequency that the DHL flight was on. And from 9:33 to 9:34 and 41 seconds, the crew had a discussion concerning an airplane approaching from the left, which was displayed on the vertical speed indicator, which is part of the TCAS. These recordings suggest the crew were trying to figure out the other airplane's position and flight level. And during these discussions, the captain said, here it is in sight. And then the plane changed its heading from 254 degrees to 264 degrees. So they're turning to their left.
Uh-huh.
The TCAS then generated the traffic warning. 7 seconds later, air traffic control instructed the crew to expedite a descent to 35,000 feet. And while this transmission was going on, the instructor sitting in the right seat requested the captain descend. The control column was then pushed forward, the autopilot was switched off, and thrust was reduced. The crew did not verbally acknowledge the instruction from air traffic control, but at the same time they started to descend, the TCAS started saying, climb, climb.
So they're just contradicting?
Right. The TCAS is telling them to climb, but air traffic control is telling them to descend. The first officer, who was seated in the jump seat, called out this warning, but the captain told him that he was instructed to descend.
Oh, no.
Right. At 9:35 and 2 seconds, which was 6 seconds after the TCAS climb instruction, the control column was pulled back some, but only enough to stop the increase in descent rate, and then the throttles were pulled back some more. At this time, the controller again instructed the crew to expedite their descent. The instructor acknowledged this immediately, and the controller informed the crew they had traffic at their 2 o'clock position. The captain then asked out, where is it? And the first officer in the back said, here on the left side. So remember, 2 o'clock would be on your
right.
right. Right. And the first officer in the back is saying, it's over here on the left.
What? Wait, is it, where is it?
Right. They don't know. They're not sure which side of the plane it's on.
Because they can't see it now?
Right. They're getting conflicting information from their instruments, from air traffic controller, from the first officer who's actually in the cockpit. So it's just increasing confusion now.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Right. And at this time, their descent rate was about 1,500 feet per minute. When air traffic control was giving his instructions, the flight navigator also commented, it's going to pass beneath us. The captain then pushed his control column again, and the rate of descent increased to more than 2,000 feet per minute. They turned 10 degrees more to the right to a heading of 274 degrees. So at 9:35 and 24 seconds, the TCAS said, increase climb. And the first officer sitting in the jump seat again called out that the TCAS is saying to climb. The control column was then pulled back, and the throttles were pushed forward some. 4 seconds later, the control column was abruptly pulled back more, and the throttles were pushed fully forward. But 1 second later, the two planes collided at an altitude of 34,890 feet. The Boeing 757 lost most of its vertical stabilizer in the collision and was destroyed by impact forces. The Tupolev broke in flight into several pieces, and both airplanes impacted the ground north of Lake Constance in the southern region of Germany, and everybody on board both planes was killed in the accident. So the DHL plane was actually to the Tupolev's left, just to be clear. It came from the left side, and it did pass right under them, but the vertical stabilizer hit the Tupolev, and it sliced it in half. And so that knocked off the vertical stabilizer from the DHL, and the Tupolev was sliced in half, and so it fell as well. And they both, crashed shortly after that.
That was all just happening in the one plane. What was happening in the other one?
We talked about the DHL one first.
Okay.
And, they were, they knew where the traffic was. They saw it, and they were listening to TCAS saying descend. The Bashkirian airline I guess, never really saw the DHL plane until the last second. And their TCAS was saying climb, but they were listening to air traffic controller who was telling them to descend. The DHL flight was trying to tell the air traffic controller about the TCAS alert and was trying to tell the air traffic controller that they were descending. But every time they tried to transmit, a little bit of spoiler here, every time the DHL flight tried to transmit what they were doing, air traffic control was talking to the other plane. So they never heard them. You know how it is like with a walkie-talkie?
Yeah, that's where you get to say over.
Right. It's like if one person's transmitting on a frequency, the other one gets blocked out. So this investigation was carried out by the German Federal Bureau of Aircraft Accidents, and they looked into how crews responded to the TCAS alerts. According to the investigators, the crew on the Boeing 757 conducted themselves professionally. They had displayed effective CRM skills and were proactive in control of the flight progress. With regards to the TCAS alerts, this crew reacted correctly and followed the specified procedures as best as possible given the particular circumstances. Analysis of the Tupolev crew shows that regarding this flight, all crew members were competent in performance of their standard duties. However, they clearly did not follow the TCAS instructions that told them to climb. This led investigators to look into the guidelines in both airlines regarding TCAS. And the TCAS manufacturer's pilot guide, the specifications regarding the TCAS system philosophy and the necessary procedures which ensure safe function were not distinctly described enough. The wording TCAS 2000 is a backup to the air traffic control system, and the see and avoid concept could be interpreted that air traffic control takes priority to TCAS and that TCAS is designed to be implemented like a kind of a substitute. It was not made clear in the description of the system philosophy that TCAS is exclusively meant as a last line of defense for the avoidance of collision, and that in the stage TCAS advisories must be disconnected from instructions given by air traffic controllers. So what they're getting at here is that in reality, in practice, the way it's supposed to work is you listen to TCAS no matter what. No matter what anyone else is telling you, air traffic control, other pilots, you listen to the TCAS.
It's like priority. It's like it, yeah.
Correct. But in the manual and in the guide, it says TCAS is a backup to the air traffic control system and the see and avoid concept, but that's not entirely true. It's a backup in the sense it's like a fail-safe.
Yeah, but does it mean it should be, you should follow air traffic over TCAS?
Correct.
Yeah. That is worded.
It could be worded better. There's ambiguity there.
Yeah.
The TCAS 2000 Pilot's Guide does not state clearly enough that the safe separation accomplished through air traffic control and the tasks of TCAS are two different functions. It is not clear that TCAS is not part of the conceptual design of air traffic control. However, the guide also uses contrary instructions in one of the chapters by saying that pilots must not delay in responding to resolution advisories, must not modify a response to a resolution advisory, and must follow the resolution advisory maneuver unless invoking emergency pilot authority. Remember, I said resolution advisories are like the more critical alert from TCAS. It's like, it's when it tells you to climb or descend or to deviate in some way. The descriptions in this guide were the basis of TCAS training within the operator companies and for the procedures in the flight operations manual. So they just weren't really clear enough with the guide as far as giving full authority saying, listen to TCAS above everything else.
You said they couldn't hear the TCAS because the navigator was talking over it? Is that what you said?
The first officer was telling them what the TCAS was saying because they were doing the opposite. The two pilots who were actually flying were doing, one thing, they were descending. The first officer was telling them, that's telling us to climb.
Yeah. So did the other plane have any idea before it hit?
Yeah, the DHL flight saw the Tupolev. They knew where they were. They saw them. They clearly knew what was going on, and they were listening to the TCAS, trying to avoid the...
God, that must have been so frustrating to be like, well, we're doing it right. Wait, what are they doing? What are they doing? Just like...
Yeah, they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. They're doing everything correctly. And they still, end up colliding with that plane.
And what was the time, what was that time period that we just talked through? Like how, because it seems, we talked through it and it seemed long, but I bet it was like super fast.
Yeah, so the first alert when the first officer in the DHL flight got up to go to the bathroom was at about 9:34, and the collision occurred just before 9:36, at about 9:35 and 32 seconds. So it was about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes total time between the first alert and the collision. So you can see why there's urgency in a TCAS alert.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of time. There's no time to question it or to wonder like, who do we listen to? No. If the TCAS is giving you a resolution advisory, you do it immediately. There is no time. There is no, how much do I descend? What should I do? No, you listen to it right away.
Yeah. Well, also because the person on the radio is like, that's like adding in other variables and they're like telling to do this and the other, they would have to align both planes exactly, but the TCAS is like automated, so it's like takes out the human error, right?
Right. That's by design. It's supposed to be that way. And that's why the two systems on each individual plane will negotiate with each other and figure out that advisory without having to involve a person. Just as quick as possible, figure out what's going wrong and come up with a quick solution. There's nothing quite like the feeling of gathering around a warm fire on a cool evening, and a smokeless fire pit from Solo Stove makes your outdoor moments even more memorable because instead of having to constantly dodge campfire fumes, you can sit back, relax, and actually enjoy the fire. Right now, you can get a great deal on a Solo Stove fire pit. I mean, let's all be honest. We've all dealt with fire pits or fires out and, hanging out around them and just ending up stinking of smoke and how those fumes just seem to chase you no matter where you go. With the Solo Stove, you don't have to worry about that. It's got a great design that really eliminates those fumes. So you don't have to worry about them getting in your eyes, stinging, just ruining your good time. Not a problem. And plus, it's super simple to start a fire, get it going. Even a dummy like me can do it. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it. So what are you waiting for? Upgrade your backyard with a Solo Stove fire pit. It's a perfect catalyst for getting outside and spending more time with family and friends. Build lasting memories around a Solo Stove fire pit. They're made with premium grade 304 stainless steel and a 360-degree airflow system that maximizes efficiency while minimizing smoke. It's easy to light with a few bits of starter. Your fire is blazing in minutes. It's actually really portable too. You can take it with you, camping trips, wherever you want. If you shop now, you can get up to 30% off fire pits all month long and use promo code BLACKBOXDOWN at checkout to get an extra $20 off, plus a lifetime warranty, free 30-day returns. Just go to solostove.com. Remember, you get $20 off when you use promo code BLACKBOXDOWN. Hey, that's our podcast name. Going online without ExpressVPN is like using your smartphone without a protective case. Most of the time, you'll probably be fine, but all it takes is one accidental drop on a solid concrete to make you wish you had protected yourself. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, cafes, hotels, airports, you name it, your online data is not secured. Any hacker on the same network can gain access to and steal your personal data. Doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone. Just some cheap hardware is needed. I bet a smart 12-year-old could do it. Plus, your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling your personal info on the dark web. So ExpressVPN works by creating an encrypted tunnel that's secure between your device and the internet so hackers cannot steal your sensitive data. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. By then, you don't have to worry about it. So just fire up the app and click one button, you get protected. So easy. Works on phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you stay secure on the go. I like it. Like I said, it works on all devices. Don't have to worry about it. Don't even have to think about it. It's just there whenever I need it, on my phone, on my tablet, on my laptop. Everywhere I need it, it's there. Anywhere I'm mobile, connecting to internet that's not my home internet. So secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/blackboxdown. That's expressvpn.com/blackboxdown. Get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/blackboxdown.
You're about to hear a preview of The Jordan Harbinger Show with an investigative journalist that uncovers how a fraudster siphoned off billions of dollars.
Jolo was a kid from an island called Penang. He was sent by his father to Harrow in the UK. And then he went to Wharton in America. It was almost like a family con that was going on here. From a very young age, they wanted their son to network. Very, very, very skilled networker. His childhood friend is a son of this character called Najib Razak. And Najib Razak becomes Prime Minister of Malaysia. And it sets him up as this sort of eminence grise or a Svengali type figure behind the Prime Minister. He just took all the money out of a sovereign wealth fund overnight. We think he stole at least $6 billion. But Jolo was an imposter. People still question, who was this guy? Where did he come from? Why is he splashing all this money around?
To get a deep dive into the shadowy world of corruption, money laundering, and embezzling by the shadiest shysters among the elite, check out episode 602 of The Jordan Harbinger Show.
The Boeing Flight Crew Training Manual states, flight crews should follow resolution advisory commands using established procedures unless doing so would jeopardize the safe operation of the airplane or positive visual contact confirms there is a safer course of action. It goes on to say, maneuvering opposite to a resolution advisory command is not recommended since TCAS may be coordinating with other airplanes. That's what I said. The Boeing manual specifically says, it's not recommended to go against a resolution advisory because, like I said, TCAS is coordinating. It's telling you to do one thing, it's telling another plane to do another thing. Mm-hmm. So it has typically your best course of action in mind. And this gives guidance to the crew that they should follow a TCAS resolution advisory, but does not mandate compliance with the resolution advisory, leaving the decision to the pilot in command. Because ultimately, it is the pilot's decision on what to do. It's just strongly advising them to follow the resolution advisory and explaining why. However, all this material is consistent in cautioning against a maneuver in the opposite direction to a resolution advisory and reinforcing that the resolution advisory should be followed unless it would be unsafe to do so. So that's on the Boeing side.
Mm-hmm.
The Tupolev Tu-154M flight operations manual states, for the avoidance of in-flight collisions is the visual control of the situation in the airspace by the crew and the correct execution of all instructions issued by air traffic control to be regarded as the most important tool. TCAS is an additional instrument which ensures the timely determination of oncoming traffic, the classification of the risk, and if necessary, planning of advice for a vertical avoidance maneuver. So that wording makes it clear to the operators of the Tupolev that air traffic control is the highest priority, which is why they were listening to air traffic control instead of the resolution advisory on the TCAS.
How old was TCAS at this point, like the invention of it?
So in the United States, commercial aircraft had it implemented in 1993. So at this point, it's about 9 years old.
Okay, so it's not like a new thing.
I mean, when you're talking about like in the scope of aviation where planes can be, kind of older, maybe, but it's not like it was something no one had heard of, right? It should be somewhat familiar to pilots by this point. It had been implemented long enough to the point where it's in the manuals for both of these planes.
Yeah.
It's not like they were ignorant of this technology. The investigators looked into the regulations made by the International Civil Aviation Organization in regards to the TCAS system, and they found that the regulations were also not clear and in some cases contradictory as to whether or not the TCAS resolution advisory had the highest authority. National aviation authorities base their regulations off of these, International Civil Aviation Organization regulations. So this resulted in no clear unified global understanding as to how the TCAS resolution advisory should be handled. So in the global authority, there was some ambiguity, which is why we see in this case, Boeing manual says, follow TCAS, and the Tupolev manual says, follow air traffic control. Obviously, that's the kind of loophole that leads to accidents. It's kind of like weird oversight that seems like, no, it wouldn't be an issue until it is, and until people, pass away.
Who would be responsible for setting like global standards like that?
It's this organization. We've mentioned it a few times, the International Civil Aviation Organization. It's the ICAO.
Okay, yeah.
It's a specialized agency of the United Nations, and it kind of comes up with the global rules for all of aviation that everyone follows, just to kind of create the kind of standards that we all take for granted. So the other part of this puzzle, I'm sure you've probably thought about by now, is the air traffic control. And investigators, of course, found issues with air traffic control in this area.
Yeah.
There were two controllers working this sector on the night of the accident. They both arrived for work at 5:50 p.m. And after the work had started and the air traffic control volume had decreased, because, it's nighttime, there's less traffic. So the volume had decreased. One of the controllers retired to rest in the lounge. They also had two assistants, but the assistants did not have any authority to give air traffic control instructions. One of the assistants also went to rest in the lounge soon after the one controller did. So this left one controller to monitor two workstations and frequencies on his own. The spatial distance between the lounges and the control room prevents a quick alert of the second controller in conjunction with an immediate appearance. So that's just saying the break room's a little far away. Officially, this procedure did not exist, but this had been in practice at this control center for many years.
What would you say? Wait, what procedure? Just them taking a break?
Right. The one controller taking a break. This is kind of an arrangement that the controllers had come up with to make the night shifts more comfortable. Like when it got slower, one of them would go take a long break, and then they would trade off. Then the one who was rested up would come and relieve the other one. They would go take a break. But the downside is, of course, like I said, they then have to monitor two stations. This is a way of proceeding which does not provide any redundancy of human resources so that procedural errors, wrong distributions of attention, or the omission of important actions may lead to hazardous situations, as there's nobody there to notice these mistakes and take corrective actions. It's kind of like there's no backup. There's no second set of eyes looking at things. It follows that the breaks prescribed could not be taken. Even though this was an unofficial procedure, it was known to and tolerated by the management. So, like I said, unofficial, but management was aware of this and they let it slide. They let it continue to happen, even though it wasn't official. In the moments leading up to the collision, there was an unexpected approach of a delayed Airbus A320 to Friedrichshafen that was operating on the frequency that the 757 and the Tupolev were not on. So this caused the controller to miss the Boeing 757 cruise transmission they were descending due to TCAS. When the controller concentrated again on the two planes, he noticed the separation infringement and immediately issued an avoidance instruction to the Tupolev crew, which they realized directly and acknowledged with some delay. He did not know anything about the resolution advisory, which had been issued immediately after his instruction and was in contradiction to it. Generally, it would have been possible for the controller to safely handle the traffic consisting of these 3 airplanes at the time of the accident. The controller came to the same conclusion and did not ask for support from his colleague in the lounge. The decision was probably based on his experience regarding a smooth course of operation and did not take into consideration possible problems. So basically, he was dealing with, besides these 2 planes that collided, there was this third plane, this Airbus A320 that had been delayed, that was calling on a different frequency. So that was also adding to his workload. He's dealing with this third plane on a different frequency, trying to get them help. Then, when he's done with them, he looks back over to the other screen, sees the 2 planes conflicting, has to change frequencies and try to start dealing with them. Whereas if, there was a second person there, not as big of a deal. There was also a short-term conflict alert visual display in the facility. However, it was not available because it was operating in fallback mode. The optical short-term conflict alert would have alerted the controller of the danger approximately 2.5 minutes prior to the collision. Air traffic control, however, must work even where a short-term conflict alert is not installed or is for some other reason not available. Short-term conflict alert, like TCAS, is an additional safety system. Nobody in the control room had noticed the oral STCA generated by the system. It did not influence the course of the accident because it resounds just 6 nautical miles before the calculated point of collision is reached. And at the time, the controller had already recognized the problem. So they're saying there was this other alert that wasn't working that could have potentially let them know a little earlier, but probably not a big deal because he noticed it anyway. And this is something they should have noticed regardless of that alert.
Okay.
There was a lot of other things going on in this tower. We're at the findings portion of this, but I want to paint a little more of a picture of other things that were going on in this tower. Like I said, this is nighttime. There was less traffic. So there was also maintenance going on at the time.
Oh, like in the tower with them?
Yeah, there was maintenance going on. They were doing upgrades that were planned. And as a result, that's why the short-term conflict alert was in fallback mode. The system was in fallback mode because they had taken some parts of it offline to do upgrades on it. And as a result of everything being in fallback mode, the air traffic controller screen, like his radar screen, was not updating as frequently. It was updating more slowly than normal. On top of all of that, also as part of the upgrades, their phone system was down. So that's why he was taking so long dealing with that Airbus A320. He was trying to hand them off to the airport they were going to land at, and he picked up his phone to call that airport, but his phone wasn't working. He couldn't get through. So he was taking more time having to figure out how to deal with this and try to, set aside that Airbus A320, take care of them, and then focus back on the other planes who, by the way, his screen was delayed on giving him information on because there was maintenance going on at the time.
Yeah. Sounds like you shouldn't do maintenance when also the other person's on a break, right?
Right. I mean, like you would think like there's never a good time to do maintenance, right? That's why they pick nighttime, probably less traffic. Well, there's definitely less traffic. But, when things are being worked on, when the system's not at 100%, you would think you need a few more eyes just to be safe. So I'm just trying to set what was going on for that air traffic controller. He's dealing with 2 stations that have delayed readings and his phone isn't working.
I feel bad for him.
Yeah, he was definitely set up for failure in this situation. And then on top of that, he doesn't know the TCAS is going out. When he tells the Tupolev to descend, he could have told them to climb, right? He had a 50-50 shot of calling out the correct course of action, and he picked the wrong one.
Why did he pick that one? Or why was it 50-50?
Because he could have told the Tupolev to either climb or descend. Those are the 2 options he could have told them. And he told them to descend when the TCAS was telling them to climb. If he had said climb, it would have matched the TCAS and they would have averted the crash.
But is it just arbitrary then that he could have just been like climb or descend? I mean,
yeah, if I had to guess, and this is total speculation, he probably said descend because I bet the Tupolev can't fly much higher than 36,000 feet.
Okay.
That's pure speculation on my part. So that might be why he did that.
Should anyone in the actual plane have said, "Hey, this does not match what the TCAS is saying"? Should they?
Well, the first officer who was in the jump seat was.
Well, I know
he
them. Was saying that, but did they communicate that to the tower?
No, they never communicated that they were receiving a resolution advisory. As far as I know, I should say, I don't believe they ever communicated that they had received a resolution advisory. They were just listening to air traffic control and doing what they said. There's also some speculation. Again, this is pure speculation that I've seen the investigators talk about when it comes to this incident. TCAS, when it gives an alert, it's a very cold, monotone, detached voice, right? So TCAS is sitting there just very matter-of-factly saying, climb, climb. Meanwhile, they have a human who's probably very urgently saying, hey, you need to descend right now. It's like, which one do you listen to? The calm voice or the excited voice?
Yeah.
You know, it's just like part of that human psyche, listening to the more urgent voice as opposed to like the more calm one.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's just like a human.
Right. So I'm just like a little more, I guess, story, a little more detail, kind of filling in on, not just reading bits of reports, but just trying to like paint the picture for everything that's going on, setting all of this up. So findings here. In both airplanes, there was no evidence of TCAS malfunction. Like we said, the TCAS resolution advisories, if they had been followed, would have been the correct course of action here. The Boeing 757 TCAS computer was destroyed by impact forces, so an evaluation was not possible anymore. It was possible to analyze the essential data of both airplanes from the TCAS computer of the Tupolev Tu-154M. At the time of the accident, visual meteorological conditions at dark night prevailed. So that's just saying they were able to see. There was visual conditions. It wasn't instrument meteorological conditions. They weren't in clouds. There was no fog. It was a clear night. Due to the high closure rate of 702 to 718 knots and the darkness, a visual avoidance maneuver for neither of the flight crews was a possibility to prevent the collision. And that's just saying they were converging so quickly and at night, it would have been impossible to do visual avoidance. Like they would have seen them and then, been on top of each other instantly.
Well, yeah, like because we were saying it was like a minute or a minute and 30 seconds, but that's without them even seeing it, right?
Right. And the DHL flight did see them, but, they tried to do a course of action, but the other plane did the same thing, and that's why they collided. The flight paths crossed at right angles. The Boeing 757 had a northern heading of 004 degrees, and the Tupolev Tu-154M had a western heading of 274 degrees. The collision occurred at an altitude of 34,890 feet. Both operators had provided training programs for TCAS, and the flight crews had, as far as necessary, completed the corresponding trainings. Practical TCAS training of the flight crew of the Tupolev Tu-154M in the flight simulator was not possible, as the simulators were not appropriately equipped. The flight operations manuals of both operators contained provisions for the handling of TCAS. The flight operations manuals of both operators did not contain detailed descriptions of the tasks of the individual flight crew members in the case of TCAS occurrences. In the operations manual of the Tu-154M, the TCAS description wording was such that air traffic control had the highest priority in collision avoidance. And we mentioned that earlier. It said to defer to the air traffic control. According to the duty schedule, 2 controllers were responsible for the control of the entire airspace of ACC Zurich during the night shift. They had to assume the tasks of radar planning, radar executive, and to a limited extent, also the functions of the supervisor and system manager. Therefore, a continuous management of the different tasks was not ensured. An assessment to minimize risks during the night shift did not take place. So again, there should have been 2 people there.
Yeah.
2 assistants were at the disposal of the controllers to support them with routine and coordination tasks. However, they had no authorization to assume any traffic control functions. Like I said, there were assistants there. They just kind of helped, print out and hand off, those little, I don't know how to describe them, those little blocks that air traffic controllers use to move around to coordinate where the planes are in their head.
Yeah,
so it's more like they're just like they're assistants. They don't do any actual controlling. They're just there to help do other things that the air traffic controllers may need.
They move the blocks.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Like those little blocks, they put the little strips on them. Yeah. You see them in movies and TV shows all the time. I have no idea what those blocks are actually called. After the air traffic flow had decreased, one controller retired to rest at about 9:15 p.m., and approximately 10 minutes later, one assistant retired to rest. Normally, they would not return to the control room until early in the morning. Like I said, they would swap out partway through the shift. It had been known to and tolerated by the management and the quality assurance of the Air Navigation Service Company for years that during the night at periods of low traffic flow, only one controller performed all air traffic control tasks, whereas the other controller had a rest. The controller was solely responsible for the entire air traffic control within ACC Zurich. For this, he had to fill 2 adjacent workstations with different frequencies and worked with 2 radar monitors in order to control flights in the upper airspace and the approach in the lower airspace to Friedrichshafen. Radar charts with different ranges were displayed on the monitors. And Friedrichshafen is that airport, like I mentioned, where that Airbus A320 was going into land. The controller was not aware that in the fallback mode, the optical short-term collision alert was not available. Remember, I said the system was in fallback mode because they were doing maintenance.
Yeah.
According to his statement, the controller did not notice the message of the Boeing 757 crew. The first part of the message was incomprehensible due to the simultaneous transmission of both crew members. The second part coincided with a message at the adjacent workstation transmitted by the Airbus A320. Like I said, the Boeing 757 was trying to tell him what they were doing. The first time they transmitted, it got blocked because he was talking to the Tupolev. The second time the Boeing transmitted, the air traffic controller was at the other workstation dealing on a different frequency with the Airbus A320.
Yeah, man, it's like everything all aligning in the worst way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what a lot of these incidents are. Like, what are the odds that the Boeing would be transmitting at the exact wrong, like not the wrong times, but at the exact time as someone else, or that,
it's updates. Someone's on a break. It's the two planes are like don't have the same instructions, and then another plane comes by at the same time, and it's like
right. Then the third plane was delayed. Like it should have been through there earlier. Like
it's like Final Destination type stuff. You know what I mean? I know a less dramatic and obviously, but you see in those movies where it's like one little thing rolls this way, and it's like a what do you call those?
Like a Rube Goldberg
machine for disaster. But like,
I haven't even talked about this. I wasn't sure if we would bring it up or not. But if you want to really get like blown away by the coincidences and just like the small chain of effects, if you want to really break it down, the Tupolev shouldn't have even been there. This was a charter flight, and this flight had been delayed by 2 days because the people who had chartered it, remember I said it was a bunch of school kids? When they went to the airport, the bus driver took them to the wrong airport, so they missed their initial charter flight. What? So the charter company had to arrange for a new flight 2 days later, and that's this plane. They should have already been in Spain 2 days before this.
I mean, does that have anything? I mean, just the fact that they had this new flight, is that, I mean, it's just like when they wouldn't normally have a flight, or is it just another coincidence?
It's just another coincidence, right? Like these kids, they went to Moscow. Bus driver took them to the wrong airport, so they missed their flight. So they spend 2 days in Moscow, get on another plane, and that plane just happens to be this one that collides with this DHL flight. And like I said, it was a charter flight. This plane wouldn't have been there if they hadn't chartered it, if they hadn't missed that first flight, if the bus driver had taken them to the correct airport. Again, it's just another one of those things. Like the more you look at it and the more you like take a step back and look further, it's just even more unbelievable coincidences that all line up to cause this collision. So, we're going to get into the causes here found by the report, and the following immediate causes have been identified. The imminent separation infringement was not noticed by air traffic control in time. The instruction for the Tupolev to descend was given at a time when prescribed separation to the Boeing 757 could not be ensured anymore. So, air traffic is just basically saying that the air traffic control told the Tupolev to descend without telling the Boeing what to do, and not knowing that they didn't have time to tell the Boeing what to do, so they couldn't be 100% sure that this was going to solve the situation that was happening.
Okay.
The Tupolev crew followed the air traffic control instruction to descend and continued to do so even after TCAS advised them to climb. This maneuver was performed contrary to the generated TCAS resolution advisory. And the following systemic causes have been identified. The integration of ACAS and TCAS into the aviation system was insufficient and did not correspond in all points with the system philosophy. The regulations concerning TCAS published by the International Civil Aviation Organization, and as a result, the regulations of national aviation authorities, operational and procedural instructions of the TCAS manufacturer and the operators were not standardized, incomplete, and partially contradictory. This is kind of some of the things we talked about. There was no clear-cut standard for how this should be approached. When you're reading it, it seems okay until you come to a situation like it's like, oh, there was ambiguity in that sentence, wasn't there? It's like, it happens all the time, right? Like I'll send an email to someone and they'll reply with something totally different. Like, why did I get this? And I'll reread my email and be like, oh, I see they interpreted what I wrote in a different way.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing where it's like language is flexible, especially in this kind of deal where you're dealing with all these international agencies. Not only are you dealing with the ambiguity of language, but then when it gets translated, it may be translated slightly differently than it was originally intended.
And we've already talked about some countries and regions have different like philosophies. I don't know any philosophies, but you know what I mean? Like how the is it Russia?
Just culture.
Yeah. Well, and even is it Russia that has the flip-flopped of the
ADI?
Yeah. Stuff like that.
That's also, there was some speculation about cultural differences coming into play here, that the Russian pilots were more likely to listen to humans as opposed to a computer because they trust people more than they did the machine. That there, of course, there's no way to quantify that.
Yeah.
But there is some speculation that may have also played into it, that in becoming pilots, in learning to fly, that they're always taught to listen to air traffic control no matter what. And it comes across in their flight manual. That's what it even says. Air traffic control is, the ultimate authority. And that may be a part of it as well. Again, that's impossible to quantify. So management and quality assurance of the Air Navigation Service Company did not ensure that during the night, all open workstations were continuously staffed by controllers. Again, one of the controllers went to take a break in the lounge. Management and quality assurance of the Air Navigation Service Company tolerated for years that during times of low traffic flow at night, only one controller worked and the other one retired to rest. That's really, really damning for air traffic control that happened. And we got some recommendations here. The International Civil Aviation Organization should change the international requirement so that pilots flying are required to obey and follow TCAS resolution advisories, regardless or whether contrary air traffic control instruction is given prior to, during, or after the resolution advisories are issued. Unless the situation is too dangerous to comply, the pilot flying should comply with the resolution advisory until TCAS indicates the airplane is clear of the conflict. So they're stating it very explicitly. They're like, no ambiguity here. TCAS is the ultimate authority in conflict. If it goes off, you listen to it. As long as it doesn't immediately put your plane in danger, right?
Yeah.
That's the final call of the pilot. But if TCAS is going off, chances are it's telling you to do the right thing. The Federal Office for Civil Aviation should ensure that the ACC Zurich is manned with the minimum number of air traffic controllers as follows. There shall be at least 2 controllers on active duty at all times. There shall be at least 2 controllers to manage en route sectors, 1 radar planner and 1 radar executive. When ACC is required to manage the approach services for Friedrichshafen and Alterhain-St. Gallen, 1 additional controller shall be assigned to this task. Alternatively, this task should be taken over by APP Zurich. So just mandating there needs to be more people. And if you're also doing approaches for Friedrichshafen, you need another person for that. Additional controllers shall be assigned to manage brakes. Again, they're just trying to make sure they have enough people and this doesn't happen anymore. International Civil Aviation Organization should ensure that rules and procedures regarding airborne collision avoidance systems are uniform, clear, and unambiguous. Again, what we talked about, all countries should be approaching this the same way. International Civil Aviation Organization should ensure a high level of acceptance and confidence of pilots' staff in ACAS by improving education and training. To enhance the performance of ACAS, the International Civil Aviation Organization should initiate the development of downlinking resolution advisories to air traffic control by using technologies as SSR Mode S and Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, or ADSB. ADSB, we've talked about that before. It just became a requirement in all planes in the U.S. operating in most airspaces in the last couple of years. This requirement was written back in 2004. And ADSB is just like a broadcast system that lets planes know where other planes are. Like if you ever use like a flight tracking website, that's reading ADSB data from planes so you can see where they are. And then I know that suggestion was kind of like a mouthful of technical stuff. And it's just saying that if a resolution advisory gets given in a plane, there should be a system for that to pop up on air traffic control scope as well. That way they know, the air traffic controller can see, oh, TCAS went off in these planes and this is what it's telling them to do.
Yeah, it's just kind of reinforcing TCAS number 1.
Right. And that way the air traffic controller doesn't try to say something contrary to what's being broadcast to the planes. The Federal Office for Civil Aviation should ensure that the air traffic control units of the air traffic control service provider are equipped with an effective short-term conflict alert system covering the following minimum demands: an appropriate indication of failure or unavailability of the short-term conflict alert at the affected air traffic controller workstation, an adjustment of volume that prevents the controller from missing the acoustical STCA warning, and when activated, the acoustical STCA warning should sound permanently until acknowledgement at the affected workstation by the controller. So this is dealing with that alert I was talking about that wasn't working because the system was in fallback mode. Just saying, like, if it's not working or if it's unavailable, there should be an alert about it. And they should be, the volume should be turned up so you can't miss it, and that when it activates and when it sounds, it should continue to sound until cleared by the workstation where the alert is occurring.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. It all seems, in hindsight, it all seems like common sense.
Fire alarms don't stop until there's no fire.
Right.
Until there's no smoke.
Right. Someone acknowledges it and turns it off and says, yes, I checked it and everything is okay. The Federal Office for Civil Aviation should ensure that the air traffic service provider takes appropriate action to assure an effective operation of their safety management system, inasmuch as that international requirements are assured and appropriate safety strategies, management techniques, and quality procedures are incorporated and evaluated. The Civil Aviation Authority of the Russian Federation should ensure that exposure to crew resource management training within the airline industry is advanced. The use of flight simulators or appropriate synthetic training devices for line-oriented flight training should be promoted. The FAA should ensure that the TCAS 2000 manufacturer rephrases the TCAS 2000 operating manual to reflect the ACAS TCAS system philosophy and the international ACAS TCAS regulations and operating procedures in an unambiguous and consistent manner. Again, that goes back to the thing we said super early on, where the manual was seemingly kind of ambiguous and seemingly kind of deferred to air traffic control. Like, got to remove that, got to be very explicitly clear about it. And that's all the findings and recommendations.
What ended up happening with the air traffic control? Did either of them get in trouble, or like who?
Chris, we have barely started to scratch the surface of this episode.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. Wait, really?
You asked the perfect lead-up question at the perfect time. Before I get to the air traffic controllers and what happened there, I'm going to step back, take one step back. We're going to talk about the air traffic control company first. So the air traffic control company that was controlling this airspace was a company called SkyGuide. Air traffic control in this region had recently been privatized. It was no longer a government function. It was a private company called SkyGuide that was providing air traffic control. And when this incident happened, they initially blamed the Russian pilots for the accident. Right? Whenever accidents happen, no one wants to take responsibility. Yeah. They blamed the Russian pilots. Then eventually, as all the information comes out, they accepted full responsibility and they asked the relatives of the victims for forgiveness. SkyGuide paid compensation to the families of the dead children, and the compensation amount was about 30,000 to 36,000 Swiss francs. So today, let's say 35,000 Swiss francs is equivalent to about 36,000 US dollars.
Okay.
The furthest back I can look is about 10 years ago, and the currency stayed relatively stable. So even if it was like back in 2012, it would have been roughly the same amount. So I'm going to say, you can probably say it was in that same neighborhood. Of course, not adjusted for inflation or anything.
Okay.
The Swiss federal court turned down appeals from some relatives for higher compensation in 2011. And on July 27th, 2006, a court in Konstanz decided that Germany should pay compensation to Bashkirian Airlines. The court found that Germany was legally responsible for the actions of SkyGuide. The government appealed the ruling, but in late 2013, Bashkirian Airlines in Germany reached a tacit agreement, ending the court case before a decision on the legal issues was reached. A criminal investigation of SkyGuide began in May 2004, and on August 6, 2006, a Swiss prosecutor filed manslaughter charges against 8 employees of SkyGuide.
Wow.
Yeah, the prosecutor called for prison terms up to 15 months if found guilty, and the verdict was announced in September 2007. 3 of the 4 managers convicted were given suspended prison terms, and the 4th was ordered to pay a fine. Another 4 SkyGuide employees were cleared of any wrongdoing.
So no one really went to jail, right?
Not really. They were, some people were found guilty. They were given suspended prison terms. And some people paid a fine. There is more still to this story, though. Like I said, this plane was filled with students. The Tupolev was filled with students who were going from Russia to Spain for a vacation. Like I said, it was a charter flight. But on top of those students, there was also a family on this flight. The father of the family worked as an architect in Spain. So his wife and his 2 kids were flying from Russia out to Barcelona to come visit him while he was working in Spain. And, the architect's wife and 2 children died on the Tupolev flight. And he was so upset that, the architect, I should say, was so upset that he immediately flew from Barcelona out to the crash site to try to find his family's remains. He actually found his daughter's body intact. She was 4 years old. He didn't find his wife and son. Eventually, of course, their bodies were found a few days later, and they offered him 160,000 Swiss francs, so a little more than everyone else. It's an awful story. He actually found her pearl necklace first on the ground, and then nearby, found her body intact, and of course, she had passed away from the impact. So, he wanted to get to the bottom of this. He wanted, something to happen to the specific controller who, in his mind, was responsible for his family's death.
Yeah.
The controller who was working at the time, his name was Peter Nielsen. And after the accident, of course, he needed medical attention due to traumatic stress caused by the accident. And at SkyGuide, his former colleagues maintained a vase with a white rose over his, the workstation where he was working. And like I said, this architect, his name was Vitaly Kaloyev. he held Nielsen personally responsible for the deaths of his wife and his 2 children who were on that flight.
Mm-hmm.
And, this architect, Vitaly Kalyev, he would attend memorials and, press conferences by Sky Guide, and he would, demand that they apologize. And, he would ask, to meet with Nielsen because he wanted to hold Nielsen personally responsible for this incident.
Uh-huh.
A couple of years later, on February 24th, 2004, Kalyev tracked down Nielsen and stabbed him to death.
Oh, my God.
At his home.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he went out there and he went to Nielsen's home at night and sat in the garden out in the front yard. And, Nielsen saw someone out in his yard and, opened his door, went out to tell this person to go away. And, Kalyev stabbed him, in front of his family, who were all there as well.
Oh, my. That is some, movie crazy dramatized. I don't know. That sounds insane.
Yeah, it's just like the tragedy just keeps going with this incident.
Yeah. And wait, how long had that been since the actual accident at that point?
The accident was in July 2002.
Uh-huh.
Nielsen was murdered in February 2004. So not quite 2 years.
Oh my God. That's you have a heck of a vengeance if you're
his entire family was killed, and he as far as he believed, this was the person responsible for it. I'm not justifying it at all. I'm just saying that's why he was so angry.
Yeah.
The Swiss police arrested Kalyev at a local motel shortly afterwards. And in 2005, he was sentenced to 8 years for manslaughter.
That's it?
Yeah, and then on top of that, his sentence was later reduced after a Swiss judge ruled that he had acted with diminished responsibility. He was actually released in November of 2007, having spent, just less than 4 years in prison because his mental condition was not sufficiently considered in the initial sentence.
Whoa. So that's an easy sentence for stabbing a dude.
Yeah, it seems like he got off pretty light. In fact, and then he returned home back to the Ossetia region of Russia. And in 2008, he was appointed Deputy Construction Minister of North Ossetia. He was actually treated as a hero back home.
Oh my God.
When he returned home, he has expressed no regrets for his actions.
He was treated as a hero for stabbing the guy?
Yeah, because remember, these were all exceptional children from that area.
Mm-hmm.
They exceeded, they did very well in their respective fields that they were doing.
It's sympathetic. You feel for, but I don't know, just to be I waited in the garden and stabbed him.
Yeah, and he blames the murder victim for his own death. He still has expressed no regret over this. And in 2016, Kalyev was awarded the highest state medal by the government, to the glory of Ossetia. It's awarded for the highest achievements, improving the living conditions of the inhabitants of the region, educating the younger generation, and maintaining law and order. So he's totally considered a hero in that area, in that region.
Had he done other things to merit that award, or was it a lot of that award because he went and stabbed the guy? I
don't know. I can't speak to that. I can't say with any definitive authority, but I will say he did not get that award till 2016, which was several years later, but I don't know. It seems really weird to me in general to even give this highest achievement government medal to someone who murdered someone else.
Yeah.
Regardless of whatever other achievements he may have had.
It's just a bad look. Unless that's the look you're going for.
Yeah, it's an awful situation all around. There, like I said at the top of this episode, there's just so much that happened here. And then even after the accident, this murder that happens, and I don't know, so many things went wrong and then just continued to go wrong. And ultimately a lot was learned from it. With TCAS, it's much better now. Pilots know to 100% listen to resolution advisories and deal with them. But still, all these people died needlessly.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of the memorial. I'm going to see if I can put some on our social media, the Oberlingen Memorial, where this crash, where the planes actually came to rest on the ground. It's like a long broken pearl necklace.
Oh, that's tragic.
Yeah, it's it looks really cool. I think it's really a striking memorial, like a reminder of what happened there.
That is, though, also, playing into that one person's perspective.
Yeah, he did find the pearl necklace. I think it's not entirely clear if that's supposed to be the same pearl necklace or just one in general. But yeah, I'm sure it also breaks his heart to know that he found that.
I was not expecting a stabbing an hour in.
Well, you don't normally expect that with a plane crash or the incidents that we talk about.
No, just it was like the second episode we did, the UPS one.
Oh, FedEx
one. Yeah, that one had a hammer stab, but
a hammer and a spear gun.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. That's the Uberlingen midair collision. One that I've wanted to do for a while, one that people have asked about, but I felt like, I don't know, we needed to have a bunch of episodes under our belt before we could start tackling this one. But I do want to remind people we are going on break. This is our last episode for a little while. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a supplemental episode. So we just take a couple of weeks off just to get some research done for the next batch of episodes. But we will still continue putting some supplemental stuff out in the meantime to kind of hold you over. But yeah, that's what you can expect in 2 weeks from now.
And it's good stuff. It's not just like...
Yeah, it's not filler. It's good stuff. It's just different than our normal content.
Yeah, and we have the new video stuff. So if you want to check that out.
Yeah, it's over at the Black Box Down YouTube channel.
Oh, and get some merch.
All right, well, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.